Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge & Company. The Crime Victims Treatment Center in St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital is the largest and most comprehensive victim treatment center in New York and one of the largest in the country. Under the incredible leadership of its director, Susan Xenarios, it has always been on the cutting edge of compassionate medical and forensic care of victims of violence. And she is my guest today. I was going to say victims of crime. It's not that different, is it?
No. I mean, it's victims of violence and other crimes, perhaps.
Right.
We just,
not like embezzling, but physical or something else.
Yeah, and also we do see, I mean, crimes change,
Yeah.
you know, with the time. I mean, we see victims of electronic crimes, you know, and computer crimes.
Interesting when we're seeing that now.
That's right.
Yeah. But, and it has changed. I was thinking back, way back when I was younger, and that's way back. If you were raped,
Yeah.
it was, you didn't necessarily report it.
No.
If you didn't, you were always on the defensive. People would think, oh, she was asking for it, oh, she wasn't really raped or something. And the police didn't really know how to respond to it, did they?
Well, there were no procedures for police or for hospital emergency rooms.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think back 20, 30 years ago, I mean, it was pretty impossible to even successfully prosecute a rape.
Didn't you need to have a corroborating witness or something?
Yeah, yes.
So how did you have somebody watching as you're raped? I mean,
Well, you don't.
yeah.
You know,
I mean,
it's interesting, Ronnie, because actually that's the reason why our program was established. You know, in 1976, the laws began to change in New York State, and they became much more liberalized, and there was a very active anti-rape and women's movement. We changed a lot of laws, and we began talking about forensics, although we're not talking about forensics now, you know, with DNA and everything else. It's much more sophisticated, but we're talking about corroboration. We're talking about finding evidence of whether or not it's evidence on the body, whether or not it's semen, but at least corroborative evidence and consistency in telling the story. And but these are crimes that occur in privacy. So what happened in 1976 was a co-ed, a female student on Columbia campus was raped in the daytime. And it was witnessed, and she screamed. And the perpetrator got away. Nobody did anything. Well, this mobilized the community. She was admitted, she was hurt enough to cause an admission. She was admitted to St. Luke's Hospital on 113th Street. She then was transferred to a psychiatric unit because...
It was hysterical.
well, the diagnosis was paranoid. Did we know about post-traumatic stress? No. So she left the hospital and she never returned to Columbia. And it was a case that brought attention to the irony of the time because we had just liberalized our laws. And here was a case where the perpetrator, where there was witnesses, at least seeing a perpetrator leave the scene of the crime. Nobody ran after the perp. Nobody did anything. And here we re-victimized her over and over again. And so the community mobilized, and it was really quite an incredible experience for me. I worked in the emergency room at the time. And the result was to create a program and use volunteers from the community and train them. And they were on call to the emergency rooms, and it was the first hospital-based rape crisis program in the city.
I remember that, and then, because I was on the board of the advisory committee at Barnard.
Yes.
I went to Barnard, right.
Yes, yes.
And they were, that's right, it was the whole thing about volunteers, that you could call somebody anytime.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that because we worked closely with, you know, Columbia Barnard.
Right.
But we also had the neighborhood that was part of this. We had the
So
community.
you had a combination of the community and also the women's movement, which had brought up the whole question of rape and sexual violence.
That's right. And there were no protocols. There were no procedures.
Right.
And we had to create them. And Koch was the mayor then. And he created the city, you'll probably remember this too, he created the first task force on rape at that time. And so, and that was a vehicle, I think, for people like us, that we had some place to go to, but we were doing our own homework, you know. Nobody knew what to do, you know. So it really was pioneering at that time.
So what do we have now?
What do we have now is enormous sophistication and technology, and we have equipment, and we have a science that's called forensic science. And we have people that really understand this, and it's a whole different ballgame. And I think DNA has really changed the whole landscape in terms of, if we want to talk about giving victims and survivors of sexual assault and rape a criminal justice advantage, we know it's the most underreported violent felony. That has not changed.
It still is.
It still is. We want the numbers to go up. We keep telling the New York Police Department and Commissioner Kelly that when your numbers do go up, you're doing something right, because the numbers are outrageously, underreported.
Well, when they're underreported, has there been a police response initially?
Sometimes, and sometimes not. Unfortunately, there's gaps in education and gaps in training, and over 80% of all rapes, first of all, are perpetrated by people who know you. A lot of rapes are also perpetrated while women are under, or the victim is under the influence of alcohol or drugs. So there's an issue of competency versus incompetency, and so sometimes victims come into emergency rooms or will disclose rape, maybe 36 hours later, maybe 48 hours later, and sometimes we see them 96 hours later.
Yeah.
And you can still get some evidence, but it's most likely that you won't. But if I was drunk, and if I was disoriented, and if I didn't have any real memory of the rape, but 2 days later I reorganized myself emotionally and I wanted to report this, it's not uncommon for a police officer to say, but you don't have any memory, therefore,
don't report it.
Don't report it. Where's the evidence? And it's too late anyway, which is not true. But it's
Do they teach this at the police academy?
Yes.
Oh, good.
At
least to try.
We're trying, and it's like, in fact, I got a call today from a detective because we're going to be doing training in a few weeks. There has been a lot of movement on the side of the police department, and I'm really, really pleased with that. And I think Commissioner Kelly's being much more responsive than ever before. There was problems before, in terms of reporting.
Same with domestic violence.
Oh yes.
Right.
Oh yes.
So it's a whole thing. And what's interesting also is the evolution of the definition of rape.
Yes.
It's gone so much broader than it used to be, right? I'm fascinated with the question of date rape and and the rate of rape of an intimate partner.
Well,
that's sort of
we understand it more, and and the more that the statistics were coming out, we were able to really understand. Stranger rape is what we tend to read in the newspapers,
right?
Because that's the kind of rape that district attorneys and law enforcement are most fearful of, because to them that represents a menace to society. This is a predator, and predators are scary. And we know that this is a crime that the predator can escalate from raping to murder.
And raping 1 and 2 and 3.
Exactly. Yeah. So, exactly. But the majority of rape is perpetrated by people who have relationships or some relationship. It could be a fellow student. It could be a professor. It could be, a neighbor or somebody you've known from the playground down the block or something. And they're usually, and it can be a family member. And these are, because they're intimate partners also, these are very difficult cases to report. These are cases that if you're victimized in this situation, the fear is that you will judge me for not having better judgment and not knowing, or putting myself in a situation in the relationship to somehow be responsible for this happening to me. And those are some of the hardest cases, I think, to really prosecute. And, there was also a time, I think this, that a prosecutor would never take a date rape case.
Yes, it wasn't.
Would never take a marital rape case. I mean, there was a time marital rape was not illegal.
Right.
And that's not true now, and I have to say that the sex crimes unit in the prosecutor's office they're fantastic. They're taking these cases on, and they're taking on difficult cases. And I give them enormous credit. But also, they're working with people like us. Yeah. And they're working with, forensic, sexual assault forensic examiner programs, which is a team of people, volunteer advocate, you know, with a very, very highly trained, sophisticated medical provider that doesn't just give the best comprehensive medical treatment, but also is there for forensic evidence collection. And they know what to look for. And they use things like colposcopes and, you know, different kinds of lights, and they do forensic photography, and they're sophisticated and they're trained, and they follow this case to court if necessary. And what this has done in New York City especially is that we have gotten more convictions, but we also have gotten more guilty pleas with very respectable sentencing, which saves the victim the second or the third rape to have to disclose and be cross-examined and go through a trauma
So
like that.
with this increase in the ability to respond, do you have more people reporting?
We do have more people reporting, not as many as we know, all right? I wish I could say that there was a much higher percentage. I'm concerned, quite honestly, about whenever there's high-profile cases. This often discourages people from reporting for lots of reasons.
So like the recent trial
That's right.
of the police, when the woman was so discredited, basically.
Exactly, exactly. And that's a real concern, you know, that we have, and we have to work with that.
Yeah. Do you find that it's changed as the immigration has increased?
No.
No.
No. In terms of, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, as we have more and more people from different cultures coming in, does it differ?
Well, it differs to the culture, and there's a huge, you know, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry, you know, absolutely. I mean, if you have an illegal immigration status,
then you're,
you know, but the law in New York is that no, you are still eligible for entitlements. You are still eligible for services, the same as if you had a legal status. The other thing is that you cannot be penalized in any way for reporting
your immigration status.
Exactly, exactly. So, but that doesn't mean that you're going to believe it.
Yeah, it's very hard.
It is. It's a real issue of trust, and many survivors who come from other countries come from that culture, and their culture and their law enforcement and criminal justice culture is very different. Some things are legal in their country, so they may not even identify certain behaviors as being sexually abusive.
Well, isn't that what's interesting now? What's happening with Dominique Strauss-Kahn and and New York City's reaction to the charges and his arrest? I mean, there are all kinds of interesting stories, aren't they? That about how the French women are feeling more liberated, and how very helpful it is in other countries to see that we consider this a crime and we're prosecuting.
Well, I think we're also perceived as cowgirls and cowboys, you know, and this is how Americans take these cases on. That it's quite wonderful, because talking about, we're not a class society, and you know, and this really shows it. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are; you're not totally above the law here, and you know, you have to also say that there was a shift. You know, I mean, I think there was a tremendous defensive behavior on the part of him, even from women, and because what women had to do in French women, we got telephone calls. You know, I mean, and I think many other programs did too, and certainly I got emails, but there was some soul searching.
What did they say? What were they about?
Well, in the beginning, it was like, what is the big deal? They couldn't quite comprehend this, you know, and you have to understand, some people, when the allegation was initially oral, you know, oral penetration, really not defining that as, yes, that is just as devastating as anal or vaginal penetration. This is penetration into a body orifice. You know, laws are, the language of laws are different in different countries.
So that's covered by our law?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. But it's the attitude, isn't it? I mean, that women, well, that's what I read. When you've heard from people in France, what have they said?
They said, well, in the beginning, all right,
what's
the big deal?
Yeah.
What is the big deal? You know, and then if there was a kind of a self-shaming, you know, and I'll tell you this, that we have gotten telephone calls from women from outside of New York and from outside of the country and from France. And in fact, you know, we were blitzed for several days from different newspapers and TV shows, because they were getting calls because this was a soul-searching moment, I think, for French women,
Yeah.
where they really had to look at, well, wait a minute, you know, this really is a time that we can seize and really reflect on this, of what we tolerate as women in French society. And you know, and it was minimized. Let's face it, it was minimized in the beginning. And I think that, to me, that, like, what I fear is that if there is not a criminal justice outcome that I can support,
Right.
this will further discredit women.
So
in
we
that
always
culture.
want a conviction. We need a conviction,
We need a vindication.
because
Right.
that's what it is. Yeah.
Right.
Now, why is rape such? Why is it used in wars? I mean, I know that you were talking. You talked to all kinds of delegations from around the world, right? Mm-hmm. But then you talk about Bosnia, down in Africa. Why does this happen?
Well, because it really is the ultimate, you know, act of brutality and power and force and oppression. And, you know, again, you know, culturally speaking, I was in Bosnia, you know, and a team from New York City had gone to do treatment, you know, and to organize treatment models over there. And what the women who were raped were ostracized. The women who were raped, what you do is that you destroy their family system because the men leave you. You know, and therefore you destroy their support mechanisms, you know, and their other supports, you know, in their systems of living. And it is the ultimate insult to another partner.
But is there male rape against males?
Sure, there is.
Oh, there is
Do we talk about it?
in Bosnia. I meant in
Oh,
the
there
wars.
was. Oh,
Yeah.
there was.
Oh, yeah.
There
Okay.
was. I mean, but like, for instance, in the Congo, and the rape that's going on in the Congo, it is mostly female, you know, focused, although we know that
That it's
also,
also men.
but it's boys
Boys.
and young boys. And, you know, and it's children and women who are the vulnerable populations. But for the women, it really is a statement to the village, and a warning to the village that this will happen to you. And we're talking brutality. We're talking really brutality here. Many of these women have been raped multiple times, like in Bosnia. And it's not just in those places, you know. We had this during the civil rights days in rural towns, you know, where the punishment was the rape of the girl, you know. So this is an old ancient custom that I think people who do the work that I do really have a faith that we can actually begin little by little changing this culture of thinking.
So it's basically, it all comes down to whoever you talk to, social justice.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, it is an incredible phenomena that we have people who are perceived as being the powerful and the others who are powerless.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. But, you know, I will tell you that I wouldn't do this work and in treatment and trauma treatment if it didn't work. And I think people who do this with me also understand this, that what we strive for, I mean, is terrible things happened, and we are talking maybe years of healing, but you may do things you would have never done. You know, when you face death, you face life, right? And we know this. And if you can heal and recover, and you know, you can become quite powerful.
You become totally empowered, right?
Exactly, and that's our model.
Right. It's so funny because it can happen in any kind of situation or consideration. When you were talking about it, I was thinking when my first husband died, you know, I was 39, he was 42.
Right.
But out of it, surviving right away with 3 kids gave me such a sense, totally different sense. So it's coming with many challenges. I mean, it's not nearly the same, but it is that empowerment that you can do things. You find your equality.
You do.
That's basically what it is.
That's a very good term, you know. And, you know, and I mean, it's painful, you know, it's painful. And but I really do, I mean, people who walk through our doors, you know, they're there because, you know,
It's incredible.
it is incredible, and it's very hard for them. I mean, we're a hospital-based program, and we make a very strong effort not to be clinical, you know. I mean, we don't say the word patient. You know, we use clients, you know. I mean, we have a living room kind of setup, you know, and we try to be less professionalized in a very clinical setting, because if I was a victim of violence, I mean, do I think I should be a patient also?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the social justice piece too.
Yeah.
It's that
whole question of victimization. Do you do you have a catchment area?
Well, the hospital does, but we don't.
You don't.
We don't. We see anybody from everywhere.
And do you have a police presence? I mean, there are a lot of police in there. Usually, when a new client comes in. No.
No. We, you know, we see victims of all crimes, and so that means also domestic and intimate partner violence, and sometimes that also means stalkers. So we are on the alert, and there is a bell. You can't just walk into our office. We have a suite of offices, so we can get to see you before you come in. But we've had episodes in the past, and we learned from them, and they weren't very serious, thank God.
Yeah.
But we do know that stalkers will follow their victims, and so we have to protect those victims. Right. And we also learned that having an office that you have to ring a bell and it's locked makes them feel safer when they're in there too.
That's interesting.
You know?
That's very good. How many centers are there in the city?
Well, there's many different kinds of programs. I mean, rape crisis programs that are hospital-based, we're talking probably 11 in different hospitals in the 5 boroughs.
Is that up to the individual hospital?
It's up to yes, and they all have very different roots and reasons for why they're there. But there are community-based programs. Safe Horizon, of course, is one of the largest in the country, right? You know, it's a huge program. And you have Sanctuary for Families, you have Connect, you have different domestic violence. You have programs that do
different things,
but address the bigger picture like we all do.
Yeah, but,
and we work together.
But the programs that have the forensic
for the forensic treatment,
yeah.
Right? Not so many
in the city hospitals.
Well, I was at
municipal hospitals.
The municipal
Health and Hospital Corporation.
Right.
I remember when we first started trying, you know, having them in there.
Yes.
Having rape counselors in there. It started that way.
That's right. It started like ours. In fact, we helped many of them get started.
Right.
You know, it's tragic and it's upsetting about what's happening right now, because the Health and Hospitals Corporation announced a few weeks ago that they will not continue to fund their sexual assault response teams, which is the Safe Examiner and the Volunteer Advocates team. That's what a team is. And they work with law enforcement, and they act. You know, they do the medical, the psychological, and the forensic treatment with the survivor. This is probably cost the city $1.6 million a year. It's probably saved the city hundreds of thousands of dollars in court costs each year. We're talking about every HHC hospital. How many is that? I'm not quite sure. Maybe 12. But I think probably a good 10 of them do have these active programs. And we had a press conference today, and we're fighting again, you know, back to when it was 10 years ago.
So the HHC doesn't want it in their budget, and the mayor doesn't in his.
Right. The mayor's office supported these programs. And what they said, because this is such a difficult economic time, that money's going to get slashed.
How much money is it?
1.6, I believe, per year.
Million.
Yeah, million.
So why doesn't the mayor just pay for it?
Well, I'm sure he's been asked. but
that's always the problem of having such a billionaire as a mayor, because you can't understand why he doesn't pay for the programs instead of cutting it.
Well, you know, 6 years ago, when the mayor's office did support and did support HHC, he spearheaded a very strong press conference himself. All right, in front of the ME's office, and I don't understand it.
Do you have? It doesn't seem to me that you have the same economic kind of results. I don't know how to say it, but like HIV/AIDS nowadays, primarily from poor people, poor communities, and things. You don't have you don't have that kind of percentage of people reporting rape, do you?
Sure we do.
You do?
We do. Oh, no, we do.
Yeah.
I mean, it runs the gamut.
It does,
It really,
yeah.
it does. And people with physical and mental impairment,
Right.
people who, of course, if you think in terms of vulnerability,
Yeah.
I have to say that people with HIV and AIDS and history and this history often have a history
Right.
of domestic intimate partner violence, often have a history of sexual violence. Certainly, we know that the disabled community does across the board. You know, visually, deaf, mute. I mean, and we see them. You know, I mean. That is like, I would say though, in terms of services afterwards, you want very specialized services afterwards. And there are not that many programs that are equipped to really offer that. But we have them in New York. We have a few programs that are excellent.
So do we see improvements?
There's no discrimination, Ronnie.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
do we see improvement?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we do. We see improvement. You know, we see improvement. We've worked as you know, I have done this work for so long, and what I will say is that if you told me 15 years ago I'd be writing legislation, or that anybody would allow me to write legislation, or at least put language in, I would say you're crazy.
And consulting around the world.
Right, and consulting around. Yeah, I would say
Well,
no, you're nuts. You know, there's improvement because we
There's
are
more
smarter.
awareness.
There is greater awareness. There's education has worked. You know, I mean,
Right.
but we still have a strong connection to the way we were raised.
Yeah.
I still hear things like, well, that's a real rape as opposed to a not real rape.
see.
You know, we still hold people responsible in relationships, you know, that are, a lot of people don't understand how psychological abuse can lead to verbal, can lead to physical, that, you know, a black eye can lead to a broken wrist 2 months later, to a punctured eardrum 2 months after that, and that this is a course of conduct. There's, you know, there's still a lot of us don't understand that.
We've come to the end of this program.
Oh my gosh.
I know, we could go on forever. But I am so grateful that we have people like you and people like your center. And I'm going to pray that this trial results, or I don't know if it'll be a trial, but this case results in justice and in empowering other women in other places.
Thank you. And I will pray with you.
Thank you, Susan. If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.